If I were to ask you, what are the most important words in the English language? Think about that. What are the most important words in the English language? What would you say? Many of you, the first words would be these, right? I love you. Those are the most important words. Some of you would say that maybe this would be the most important word. These would be the most important words. I'm sorry. Some of you just want to hear your spouse once say, you were right. That would be the most important thing you could hear. For others of you, here's your body weight in chocolate. These would be the most important words you've ever heard in your life. Right? We can put a lot of different things on the slide, but the reality is none of these, in my opinion, are the most important words in the English language. Instead, if you were to ask me what I think the most important words are, the most important words in the English language are the words that you are saying to yourself in your head every single day. Your self-talk. These are the most important words because they are affecting your emotions and your behavior every day of your life. Let me give you an example. There's a boy named Stanley who was, in 1972, when he was 8 years old, this is how memorable this story is to him, he tried out for the 8th grade boys basketball team. Now, it was a big school. There were 100 8th grade boys trying out for this team. So there were a lot of tryouts and cut downs, and he made it to the final tryout. And the coach was watching across on the other side of the gym. The scrimmage was about to end. They passed it to Stanley in the corner. He was alone. He put up the shot and missed everything. Airballed it. Didn't touch net, rim, backboard, nothing. And the coach from the other side of the gym yelled this out, "Stanley, you've got no backbone." He shook his head in disgust and he walked over to the bench. Stanley said, "In a few minutes, the scrimmage ended, the tryouts ended, and my chance for playing 8th grade basketball ended." But something else happened that night. My coach's words, combined with the events of that evening, painted a picture of my future that took me years to overcome. I believed him. I have no backbone. I believed that in the arena of athletic competition I'd never succeed. He told me what I could and should expect in the future. And his words cut so deep I acted on them. That was the last time I tried out for anything competitive in 8th grade. The most powerful words in the English language are the words that you are telling yourself every single day. Because they're affecting your life. One author was talking about this self-talk. It's a very common thing. You can research it online. He said something I thought was so interesting. If we could bring out of your head right now the self-talk that you so naturally give yourself each day, he said this, we'd be surprised by how profoundly cruel, condemning, hopeless, and self-defeating our words are. We would be surprised at it. I mean, if you could see it all, what you say to yourself in a typical day, you would be shocked. And it is affecting us. Another author said, it inhibits you, limits you, stops you from pursuing the life you truly want to live. It robs you of peace of mind and emotional well-being, and can even lead to serious mental health problems like depression or anxiety. It's a very common thing in our society to have a society that's heavily medicated, and part of what's going on is no doubt attributable to this, because we are so relentlessly, profoundly cruel to ourselves that we can't overcome that negative self-talk. Now, that's the dark side of it. The other side of it is pretty cool. One of my favorite authors, Dr. Henry Cloud, a Christian psychologist, said this: if your self-talk concentrates on your strengths, your blessings, your successes, opportunities, and other positive thoughts, you know what's going to happen? You'll feel great about yourself. You'll enhance your ability to overcome obstacles, and as a whole, your life will become more enjoyable and fulfilling. You want that? Do you want things like this? These are all linked to positive self-talk. You want to be able to manage your stress better? Build your self-esteem, increase your resilience, overcome trauma, develop your confidence, enhance your problem-solving skills. All of those are rooted in what you say to yourself. All of them. Your self-talk is impacting every day of your life. Now, here's the challenge. You want to know what we're up against? In one study, they discovered that the average American has 60,000 thoughts a day. Viking fans have about 30,000 thoughts a day, but the rest of us have 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those are negative. What if that's true for you? What if that's true for you? What if 80% of the things that you are saying to yourself every single day are negative? Do you know what you're missing out on then? Do you know how much damage you're doing to yourself then? This is not the life that God wants for any of us. So we're starting a brand new series today called Listen to This. And it's going to be about the words that we say. And as I started writing this series, I had all kinds of messages. I actually had 2 different messages planned for today. But as I started thinking about the words that we say and how important they are in different environments, I realized, oh my goodness, if I'm going to talk about words, I got to talk about the most important words, what you say to yourself every day. So what I want to talk about tonight is how to develop positive self-talk. So would you please, in your program, you have these notes. Would you grab your notes out of your program? Grab a pen. There will be some things you're going to want to write down as we go through this today. Welcome to those of you watching on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. The notes are right in the link below. We're glad you're watching. So let's get right into this tonight. First off, you have to understand the importance of self-talk. You really have to understand why this is so important, or you're going to miss out. Understand the importance of self-talk. Isn't this true? And if you don't know this is true, you'll learn this. We are all the prophets of our own life. All of us are the prophets of our own life. You are constantly predicting your future. Whether you're aware of it or not, you are. You are constantly predicting what your future is going to be like. You ever said anything like this to yourself? I'll just fail anyway. You just predicted what your future is. I'll never be happy. I'll always struggle with this. Things will never get better. I'll always be this way. All of these are prophecies. All of them. You and I are constantly predicting what we think our future is going to be like. And notice that they are all negative. This is what negative self-talk does for us. It creates a picture of our future that is incredibly dark and bleak. And that affects us. That affects us. There was a counselor who had a woman make an appointment. Her name was Kathy. First day she walked in, he was surprised. She walked in, she was impeccably dressed, firm handshake. He discovered that she was a partner at a law firm in the area, a very prestigious one. She had risen rapidly through the ranks to partner level. He was like, why are you coming here to see me? But he discovered very rapidly in conversations with her that she had a brittleness inside of her. She broke easily. He said, I learned right away that she was extremely hard on herself. Quick to apologize, highly self-critical for anything she judged to be less than perfect in her life. Some of you know people like this. Some of you are like this. He said one time, she thought she'd done something that caused the company to lose a major account. No, they didn't. They didn't lose the account, but she thought she had. She blamed herself for this loss. He said in his office she burst into tears, sobbed in her hands, wondered out loud how she could be such an idiot. She was sure her senior partners would never again trust her judgment. That's a very common tale. That's a very common tale. The Bible says this. Be careful how you think. You know why? Because your life is shaped by your thoughts. Your life is shaped by your thoughts. So I've taught on this many, many times. I plan to teach on it for as long as I'm a teacher. Because when I learned this years ago, it really changed my life. My goal is to say it enough that eventually all of you who listen know that the ABC formula is affecting you every day of your life. A, there's an activating factor. Something happens. B, there's a belief that's either formed inside of you or triggered that already lives inside of you. And C, there's an emotional consequence for that. This is happening every single day of your life. Things happen, there's a belief that's either formed or triggered that already is inside of you or is formed inside of you, and there's an emotional consequence for that. And we'll come back to this again. So what I wanted to do is show you how this actually works in your life. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to do some self-evaluation tonight. I really want you to think seriously about what kind of self-talk you have going on inside of you, because this is affecting you. So what I want to do is, if you go online and Google negative self-talk, you'll find that there are about 50 different things I found, forms of this. I wanted to show you the 4 most common that I've encountered, and I want you to evaluate whether these are part of your life. So on your notes, letter A, the first is self-criticism. Self-criticism. Self-criticism sounds like this. I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm such an idiot, I'm such a failure, I'm no good at anything. We can put so many things like this on a slide. Have you ever heard words like that in your head? Some of you really understand what Job said when he said this: everything I say seems to condemn me. You attack yourself constantly. If you want to know how much self-criticism is a part of your life, make a big mistake. Make a big mistake. And then pay attention to what thoughts you have in your head. Because that's where you'll discover how much self-criticism there is. So let me go back to that story I just told with this woman named Kathy. Activating factor. You make a mistake that might just cost a major account. That's the activating factor. What's the belief? See? This is proof how stupid I am. I can't get anything right. That's what she thinks. That's what she believes. So is there emotional consequence for believing that? Despair, hopelessness, discouragement, sadness. She cries in the office, cries uncontrollably, extremely depressed. You know why? Because if you believe you're an idiot who can't get anything right, well, that's a pretty depressing thought. This is what happens all the time. So let me show you how this is working in your life. Everything starts with a fact. So the fact, again, in that story is I made a mistake with a major account. In this last week, things happened in your life that triggered emotional reactions inside of you. There was an event. You were in a car accident. You got fired. You didn't get the job you're trying for. You had a conflict with an important relationship. You forgot something. You forgot to pay a bill on time. Whatever it is. Things happen to you. Now you have two choices when those things happen. First off, you can make constructive choices. By the way, that constructive choices are focused on the behavior itself. So, oh my goodness, I made this mistake. Well, I own that. Correct the mistake if possible. You create a new process to prevent it. You're thinking about positive things. You're like, okay, I did this. I own it. The behavior was wrong. How do I make sure that doesn't happen again? How do I clean up what I've done? The behavior is the focus when you're doing it in a healthy way. That's not what happens to most of us. Instead, the person becomes the focus. I become the focus. Not my behavior, me. So I label the behaviors, I'm a terrible screw-up, and then I attack and judge and condemn myself. I'm just so stupid. I'm just so lazy. I am. This is what's causing so much of the destruction in our lives. We don't focus on the behavior and the mistake we made. We focus on us. And we unleash this tremendous self-criticism. And it's so destructive. So do you see any of this self-criticism inside of you? Some of you know you're too hard on yourself. You know it. By the way, when you're really hard on yourself, you are almost always too hard on the people around you too. You're just giving to them what you give to yourself. Second one is self-rejection. Oh my goodness, is this a problem in America right now? This is where you are obsessed about your flaws and weaknesses and the things you can't do well. Because we live in a society that's constantly about comparisons, this is a big problem. If I were to ask you, I could prove this right now. If I were to ask you to make a list right now of the top 10 things that you do well, your strengths, some of you couldn't get past 3. Some of you would struggle with 1. But if I said, now make a list of top 10 things you don't like about yourself, oh my goodness, the list fills up. Because we're constantly comparing ourselves with everyone around us and what they can do better, and what they can do better, and how they look better, and what they have. It's constant comparisons, and it's so destructive. And so self-rejection comes out with things like this: I'm too fat, I'm too thin, I'm too tall, too short, I have a horrible looking nose, I have no gifts, I don't like this part of my body, I don't like this part of my face, I don't like this part of my personality, on and on and on we go with all the rejection. Now the result of this, of course, is that we feel really, really inadequate. We feel unworthy. You can see it in the story of Moses in the Old Testament. So God appears to Moses in a bush that is on fire but doesn't burn up, and he says, hey, good news, I want you to go be my spokesperson in front of Pharaoh and tell the Pharaoh to let my people go out of slavery in Egypt. And if you know the story, you know what Moses says to God in the burning bush. He says, Lord, I'm not eloquent. I'm in the pastor sense, you've spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. I'm inadequate for this. I'm really, really flawed. Would you please? He actually says to God in the story, please send someone else. Because I'm not the one you want. This is what self-rejection does. Some of you tonight, you are so focused on the things about yourself that you don't like. You're so focused on the things about yourself you don't like. And the consequence of this self-rejection is depression and anxiety, and you feel miserable. You don't know the meaning of the word joy. Third one is self-doubt. Self-doubt. And there are a lot of ways in which we doubt ourselves. I don't think I can learn this. I don't think I'll get the job. I don't think I'm smart enough for this. I don't think they'll want to go out with me. I don't think I can make the right decision. I don't think they'll want me to be their friend. All of them, by the way, are predictions of your future, right? All of them. And they're all negative. Self-doubt does this to you. It makes you anticipate a negative future in whatever area you're talking about. That's what it does. Now, the result of having self-doubt is it paralyzes you. Many of you right now have opportunities in front of you and you haven't pursued them yet. You have relationships in front of you that could be better and you haven't done anything. You have opportunities right now for change, for moving ahead, for all kinds of things, and you're stuck. You haven't done a thing. You know to move ahead, you're just not doing it. And part of what happens is this self-doubt is so paralyzing. It actually many times makes you run from the very things that could be good for you. And you see this in the story of Elijah in the Old Testament. Elijah was one of the greatest prophets in the Bible. God was using him to confront an evil king and queen. And one day the queen says to Elijah, "You're going to be dead by this time tomorrow." Threatens him. And Elijah is so discouraged by this. If you know the story, he goes out in the middle of nowhere, lies down under a tree, and says, "I simply want to die. I'm done." One of the greatest prophets in the Bible. In other words, every single person is vulnerable to this. So discouraged. That was the emotional consequence, right? That's the emotion he was feeling. He actually says to God, "I've zealously served the Lord God Almighty, but the people of Israel have broken their covenant with you, torn down your altars, killed every one of your prophets. I'm the only one left. Now they're going to kill me too." Boy, can you imagine why he felt discouraged? Look what was in his head. Look what was in his head. And it creates the doubt. The reality is some of you tonight are running. You're running from relational opportunities, from career opportunities. Many of you are running from opportunities with God. Because you just don't think you're good enough, worthy enough. You think the self-doubt is so strong in your head. And then there's this one, self-blame. I'm not talking about appropriately taking responsibility for what you've done that's wrong. This is beyond that. Self-blame is when you just take responsibility for everything. It sounds like this: "It's all my fault for things turning out this way. I never do anything right. Why am I such a lousy parent? I can't even teach my kids well. I blame myself for causing the rape, the trauma, the abuse." Do you know how common that last one is? Do you know why so much of rape goes unreported in America? Why so much of abuse goes unreported in America? It's because so many of them believe on some level that they were partly responsible. They take blame into themselves that they have no business taking in. So we take in this stuff, we get hurt, we make mistakes, and then this is what happens. These I am statements form inside of us. For some of you, if we could get to the core of who you are, we call it your core beliefs, this is what we hear. Some of you, if you could speak honestly, "I am unlovable," that's what you feel. That's just what you believe. And you operate out of that core belief. Some of you, "I am too stupid. I'm a loser, I'm inadequate, I'm only lovable when I'm perfect." That's a very common American message. "I'm defective. I am to blame." This is such a big deal. This is so important that you understand that this is happening in your life constantly. So, I certainly know what this is like. For those of you who don't know my story, a couple of years ago, my marriage, that was extremely painful. There were a lot of things that went wrong in that. But what I have never talked about publicly and debated all week whether or not I would was that the day I resigned as a pastor, was the last day my dad ever spoke to me. My father has never said a word to me since that day. Cut me out of his will. My mom says nothing to me, won't even take my texts. My brother and sister I lost so much from people who never even asked me a question. They never even said what happened. The message to me was, you're not even worthy to be my son anymore. So on top of all that I lost so much more than that. And there have been plenty of times in the last couple of years where this little voice in my head says, see, this all happened because fundamentally, you're not a lovable person. Even your mom and dad can't love you. Even they can't love you. And it's not that people don't love you, Brian. Yeah, they love you from a distance. But if they were really close to you, like family close, then they wouldn't love you either. Now, thankfully, I've taught on this enough over the years that when that message came in, I was able to reject it. But when you even have the thought in your head, it's like the sun is on a dimmer switch, and you can just feel the darkness settling over the whole world. This is such a dangerous thing. It affects every part of our lives. Whether you are aware of it or not is affecting you tonight. So what's the solution to all this? Number 2, you have to learn to replace the negative with God's truth. This is why I'm here. This is why my life is not spiraling out of control, is because of this. You can replace the negative self-talk with God's truth. The Bible is just an amazing book that tells us things like this. One of my favorite verses. Let God transform you into a new person. How? By changing the way you think. You want to be a different person? You want to experience more joy, more peace? You want to be more content? Then you have to change the way you think. If you read the story of Jesus, it's one of my favorite things about Jesus in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is how he constantly runs around trying to change the way people think. He kept saying to them, you've heard that it was said, but I tell you it's this. And people are like, really? That's what it is? I always thought it was this. Our religious teachers say this, but you're saying it's this? I didn't know that. He was constantly trying to change the way people thought. Why? Because your whole life is shaped by your thoughts. Your thinking is impacting how you feel and the choices you make every day of your life. That's why Jesus did it. He understood this. You don't have to stay with those first 3 that we talked about earlier. A, activating factor, things are going to happen to you. B, beliefs are formed or triggered. C, there's an emotional consequence. You can do letter D and E. You can dispute the negative thoughts in your head, and you can exchange them for positive. By the way, those are written on the back of your notes. You don't have to write them all down. You can dispute the negative and exchange it for something positive. So, this is how you can have 2 people go through the exact same crisis, the exact same trauma, and one person is crushed by it, and the other person rises above it and becomes stronger through it. It's not the circumstances that are crushing you, it's what's in your head. It's what's in your head. It's the thoughts in your head that are either creating resilience or creating depression. It's not your circumstances. And you can change the way you think. So what does it mean to dispute and exchange it? Well, here's something I've never taught on before, so let me teach it this way. 3 C's tonight. First, catch it. That's the first thing. You've got to catch those negative things in your head the moment they come in. You've got to be able to catch it. If I wouldn't have been able to catch it when it came into my head, oh my goodness, I don't even want to think about where I'd be tonight. One author was talking about this, said, once you're aware of the critical voice, you'll be in a position to stand up to it. If you don't become aware of the critical voice you have in your head, you will never be able to stand up to it. It'll just continue to influence you, impact your decisions, affect your life, and you will wonder what's happening. Everyone has a critical voice in their head. You have to learn how to spot it. Now, here's the problem with those. Thoughts are instant. They're just instant. They just come in. Something bad happens to you. You find out one of your best friends has been gossiping about you. You feel awful. But before you felt anything, in your mind, in that moment, your mind was already thinking. Your mind was thinking, this is terrible. I'm going to lose all my friends. People aren't going to want to talk to me. Those thoughts are just instant. It's not like you sit down and think. It's not like bad thoughts come like this and you're like, oh, I can see a bad thought coming. Oh, no, you can't. They're just there. So I haven't learned how to catch the thought, but I've learned how to catch the feelings. So this is the key to this. On your notes, I want you to write this down right there in that blank. It says key, pay attention to your emotions. Because your emotions will always tell you when you got some thinking issues. You got something to think about. So tonight, do you feel sad or anxious or depressed? Do you feel like giving up? Do you feel worthless, hopeless, scared? Do you feel any of those things? Then what your body is trying to tell you, God built this amazing system inside of us with these wonderful things called emotions to let us know that you now have a thinking issue. We just stick on the emotions, but the emotions aren't the deal. The emotions are an indicator that something is going on up here. And if you feel these things, God is trying to say, hey, pay attention to the emotions and back up and say, what are you thinking about? Oh my goodness. I can't tell you how many times, I didn't bring my notebook with me. I have a notebook where I write down things I'm praying about. I can't tell you how many times where I've felt overwhelmed with anxiety or worry, and I'm like, what is going on? That's an indicator, right? Hey, I feel anxious tonight. What's wrong? And I've sat down and I said, okay, what's everything I'm feeling anxious about? And wrote it out, and I'm like, I have filled a page with things I felt anxious about. I was like, boy, no wonder I feel anxious. Look at what's in my head. This is happening to us every day. We just don't pay attention to it. We don't know what to do with it. Your emotions are an indicator that it's time to catch a thought. You have some thinking that you have to explore. So that's what you do. Let me go again to Elijah, the story where he was threatened by the queen. So here's what happens. Activating factor. Elijah's threatened by the queen. What's the belief in his head? Things will never change. She's killed everyone else. Now she'll kill me too. I'm the last believer in Israel. I'm going to die. And the emotional consequence, depression, despair, and fear, and he runs away under a tree ready to die. Why would he do that? Why does he feel that way? Well, if you thought those things, you'd want to die too. It wasn't the emotions that were the problem. The emotions are just an indicator of what's going on in your head. Your emotions are an amazing gift from God if you learn this. Because they will always tell you when you got a thinking issue. They will always tell you, well, I better sit down and think about what I'm thinking about. Because if you put those thoughts in your head, you'll want to die too. They'll have the same emotional consequence for you. So the second thing is, after you catch it, you've got to become aware of what's going on in your head by paying attention to your emotions. The next thing to do is challenge it. You've got to challenge that critical voice in your head. Now the best way to challenge it, and I'm so grateful for this one author. I did a lot of reading and research and prepping for this message, and I came across some great things, and this one author just made me laugh when I read this, because the first part didn't make me laugh, the second part did. The first part, he said, you weren't born with an inner critic. That is significant. When God made you, he did not make you with an inner critic in your head saying all these negative things, filling your mind with self-criticism, self-doubt. You developed that. Now, you developed it in two ways. Many of you were raised in homes where you had highly critical parents. And you developed it there. Or you were in a bad relationship and you internalized bad messages from that bad relationship. Or you went through some trauma and you internalized the wrong messages. You believed it. That's where you got those voices in your head, that criticism in your head. It came from there. But you weren't born with it, and that critic is not what God wants for your life. Did you know that? He wants that voice silenced. He wants to silence that voice because he hates what it does to you. So that was the first thing, and then he said, one way to begin to silence the voice of the critic, at least to separate it from you, it's not you. That's not the real you. He said, is to label it. Call it a name. They call it like your old hag. That's just my old hag. Call it your negative Nelly. Call it your doubting Thomas. Call it whatever you want to call it. But the point of naming it is to separate it from you. It's not really you. God didn't make you that way. He doesn't want that voice in your head. It's not the real you. So call it a name. You catch yourself criticizing yourself harshly? Now there's my doubting Thomas again. But it's not you. There's the old hag again, trying to make me feel bad about myself. Do you hear how it separates you? You've got to get it away from you. It's not I am. Oh, and there's that critic again. So significant. One woman who learned how to do this, we talk about an awful circumstance. She said when she was 4 years old, a teenage boy molested her. He then warned me not to say a thing. She said, so I went silent. But as I grew, the pain wouldn't stay quiet. It would shout when I made male friends. It laughed when I tried to feel pretty. It told me I was unlovable. Now the thing about the story is, she didn't say I felt unlovable. I am not pretty. She was able to separate out the voice, the critical voice, from the real her. The critical voice was still damaging. It had to be silenced. But at least she hadn't internalized it all the way to where she was saying, I am. Separate this out. You've got to challenge it. You want to know? This is what our God, this is where, again, learning what God has to say about you is so important. In the Bible, here's what God says, what he wants in our heads. Does he want the critical voice? No. He says, fix your thoughts on what is true. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable, right and pure, lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent, worthy of praise. I know of no verse in the Bible that says this. Fix your thoughts on what is harsh and cruel. Make yourself think about exaggerated and inaccurate and condemning and judgmental thoughts. Think about things that are destructive to you and make you feel awful. He never, ever wants that for you. He wants this. Fix your thoughts on true things and honorable things and right and pure and lovely and admirable, things that are excellent, worthy of praise. This is what your God wants for you. And if you'll learn how to challenge those negative voices, then you can have what God offers you, which is real life. And the last piece of it, the last C, after you catch them when they come in, you challenge them, then you change them. You change them. You learn how to replace that negative self-talk with what God says about you. Because the reality is you need another voice in your head. That's what you're saying? It's like, how many voices in my head do I need? Well, you got the voice of the critic. They're already in your head saying all these awful things, getting you to believe that you can't do it, that God can't love someone like you, that you'll never succeed at anything in life. You already got that voice. But boy, if you would learn to open your ear to heaven and hear what God has to say to you, you'd get a whole nother voice in your head. You'd get something that would challenge and destroy the impact of that negative self-critic that already lives inside of all of us. The reality is, what I know in the Bible is you can actually put thoughts in your head that will build hope for your future. Some of you have no hope for your future. But you can actually learn how to put thoughts in your head that will build hope, that will create hope, that will create faith so you trust Him more, that will fill you with joy and forgiveness and peace. Let me show you this. There's an amazing story in the New Testament about a woman who went to Jesus one day, and she's there kneeling down, and you'll see why she's kneeling as you read the verses. It says, just then a woman who had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding came up behind him. She touched the fringe of his robe. Why? Why'd she touch it? For she thought, if I can just touch his robe, I'll be healed. She put a thought in her head that created faith. Now, is there any evidence in the New Testament of people walking up to Jesus and touching his clothes and getting healed? Nope. None. But here's what she did know. This Jesus is unbelievably powerful. He heals people everywhere he goes, and he's an incredibly loving person. And so she put all that together to think, if I could just touch his robe, I'll be healed. And you know what happened? Jesus turned around when he saw her and said, daughter, be encouraged, your faith has made you well. And the woman was healed at that moment. She got life back because of what she thought. And her thinking created hope inside of her, and her hope drove her behavior to turn to Jesus. Your thoughts are always either turning you toward Jesus or away from him. Always. So critical that you understand this. Now the problem with this is, you change your thoughts. All right, change it from negative to positive. You can't just make this up. There's a cute little video, maybe some of you have seen it, of this little girl. Have you seen this video? She's on the counter, and she's like, I can do this, I'm amazing, I can do everything. And she goes back and forth, and she says all these positive things. And a lot of them are positive. I like my mom, I like my dad, that's good to say. But then she's like, I can do everything. And so it's like, all right, that's great. Why don't we be more like the girl? The problem is you can't do everything. So it's not a matter of just memorizing some positive mantras and chanting in a mirror every day. Here's the problem and why it won't work. You ever read, there's this cartoon, Archie and Jughead. Some of you read this at some point in your life. So Jughead one day in one of the strips is like, he's talking about something he wants to do, and he says to Archie, you know, I'm just going to fail at it anyway. And so Archie says to his friend Jughead, well, tell yourself you can do it. Speak positive messages of success to yourself. And Jughead answers, that won't work. I know what a liar I am. You can't lie yourself into feeling better, to silencing the critic. You can't. You need a different voice. You need the voice of God. You need His promises. Because then, as you learn what He says about you and your future and who you are and what He's created you for, hope and faith and joy and peace become possible. Because you'll read in the Bible things like this. God showed His great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. An amazing promise. And somebody paraphrased it to show the true essence of what God is saying right here in this verse. This is what God is saying to every one of you tonight. I loved you at your darkest. At that moment of your life, when which you regret so deeply that if you could turn back the clock and undo, you would undo in a moment. The God of the universe, the creator of all things, says, in that moment, I loved you. I loved you at your darkest. He has always loved you. He simply loved you. And if you'll listen to God and what He has to say about you, then you'll get messages like this. He will begin to show you just how much He loves you and what He has for you. And His messages will build confidence and peace and joy and love. So how do you do this? On your notes, this is really important. Write this down. What does God say about this situation? This is how to change the dark thoughts in your head into something where you can have peace or joy. You answer this question. What does God say about this situation? Now, some of you spiritually just starting out, you have no idea what God says about the situation. So we'll get to that in a moment. But here's how powerful this is. I've been practicing what I've been talking about here tonight for years. When I remember this and do it, it is incredible. When I forget it, then I can get depressed, I can get discouraged like anyone else. So one time, not that long ago, there's a situation in my life where this person is making some pretty bad choices. And I care a lot about this person. And one night, I was sitting on my couch, and I caught myself full of anxiety and worry for this person I care about. Very common. Many of you have that tonight. Some of you are really worried about one of your kids, worried about a friend, you're worried and anxious. And I was sitting there, and I sort of caught the emotion. It's like, oh, hey, I wonder what the thought is behind it. And as I backed up to the thought is, they're never going to change. It's always going to be this way. They're going to ruin their life. Man, I can't imagine why I felt anxious. I wasn't conscious or aware that I was thinking those things until I made myself back up from the emotion. Then all of a sudden I was like, wow, no wonder I feel anxious about this person that I love. So then I asked this question, what does God say about this specific situation? And then it was really cool. I didn't try to do this. It was as if I was having a conversation with God where God was answering that question. Where God was saying, Brian, you know what I say about this situation? That you're so worried about? Number one, I told you not to worry about anything because I've got it. Your worry isn't helping this other person you care about at all. You can't fix them by worrying about them. And by the way, you think you love them? You can't imagine how much I love them. And I have the ability to even turn people's wrong decisions into something good in their life and bring something good out of them. So instead of worrying about this person, just continually put them back in my hands. So it was this really cool conversation on my couch. I'm like, okay. And the peace that came over me in that situation was unbelievable. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to listen to the voice of the critics that's predicting a negative future because I have a God who predicts a different future. And in every situation, we have that choice. Listen to the critic or listen to God. One will fill us with worry, anxiety, fear. One will fill us with peace and joy. So for those of you who are followers of Jesus tonight, what are you feeling? What are you feeling? Any anxiety, any worry, any fear, any depression, discouragement? You have some work to do. You've got to back it up and say, what are the beliefs in my head that are driving these emotions that I'm feeling? You've got to do some work. Then you're going to need to listen to what God has to say to you. That will not happen by any Netflix rerun you can play. Okay? That will not happen there. You're going to have to listen for what God has to say in his book, the Bible. If you are really discouraged, get a Bible or go online. They're all over online. Go right to the middle, the biggest book called Psalms, and just start reading. I can't tell you how many times the exact words I needed were in the book of Psalms. The biggest book. Let God speak his words of hope to you, and you focus on what he has to say about your situations, not what you have to say. I also encourage you to go online, Google it, go online and find a book called Touch Points. It is a book of the promises of God. And you can just get this book ordered, it's a few dollars. Touch Points. And then every day read one. I knew a guy, I gave this to him in the worst moments of his life. And the transformation 2 weeks later, as he focused on what God had to say, was amazing. He came back 2 weeks later. That book was so well read. He'd gone on a trip. He was out of the country for a couple of weeks. There was nothing to do but read that thing. And as he focused on what God had to say, it changed him. You can do that too. If you're exploring your faith here tonight, God wants me to say to you that he loved you at your darkest. At your darkest. At the darkest moment of your life that you so deeply regret, he wasn't mad at you, ashamed of you, wanting to reject you. He loved you at your darkest. He loved you so much that he did everything to make a relationship with him possible. He sent his only son into the world 2,000 years ago to die for all that we've done that's wrong. And Jesus rose again and offers us amazing, what we're celebrating Easter. He rose again, and he lives, and he offers all of us this gift of forgiveness, if you'll just receive it. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish tonight. Maybe you're ready for a real relationship with God. You can have that tonight. With your head bowed and your eyes closed, you can say something like this to him. You can say, Jesus, I'm turning to you. I know that I've done things that are wrong, and I've heard tonight that in the darkest moment of my life, you loved me. So you can have me. I'm giving myself to you tonight. Jesus, I've heard that you died on that cross for me, so please forgive me. Please come and make your home inside of me. Begin the work of changing me from the inside out so that I can have these things called peace and joy. I want them. I'm turning my life over to you. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. As we finish tonight, can I ask you to grab your program again? And inside you should have a little slip like this, just as a response card. As you can see, I failed kindergarten cutting class because I can't cut very straight. So I want to ask you to grab this. And if you don't mind just filling it out, and if there's anything you want us to pray about, you can put it in here. And then drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes on the doors, on the wall by the doors where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you again next time.